The gunshot cracked through the marble hallway, and before anyone could react, a woman's body slammed into Chairman Kang, throwing him to the ground as the bullet meant for his skull tore into her shoulder instead. Blood sprayed across the white walls. Guards screamed. Chaos erupted. And in that single, violent second, everything that would happen 20 years later was already decided. Now, in a grand funeral hall in Seoul, hundreds of black-suited men stood in silence. Gang leaders, executives, politicians who owed their careers to one man. At the center of the room lay the coffin of Chairman Kang, Korea's most feared and respected crime boss, a man whose name alone could empty a room or fill one. His two sons stood at the front, backs straight, faces composed into practiced grief. Junho, the eldest, had already measured the room for his father's throne. Beside him, Min-jae adjusted his cufflinks and whispered calculations under his breath. Behind them, dozens of executives waited, expecting a formality. Everyone in that room believed they already knew how this story would end. Then the family lawyer stepped forward, holding a sealed envelope in trembling hands. Chairman Kang's final will, he announced, names his sole heir and successor to the entire Kang Corporation and all its holdings. Junho straightened his jacket, already rehearsing his acceptance smile. The lawyer opened the envelope. The heir, he said, voice cracking, is Amara Adeyemi. Silence. Then a ripple of confusion spread through the hall like a struck gong. Who? Someone barked from the back. A tall black woman near the rear of the hall lowered her head, her hands shaking. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't even known this was possible. Adeyemi? Junho repeated, his composed mask cracking. That's not a Korean name. That's not... His voice rose. Is this some kind of joke? The lawyer swallowed hard. She is the daughter of Grace Adeyemi, the chairman's former housekeeper. The room detonated, chairs scraped, voices collided. An executive shouted that the will must be forged. A gang lieutenant slammed his fist on a table hard enough to crack the wood. Junho's face went the color of ash, and Min-jae simply stared at Amara like she was a ghost that had wandered into the wrong funeral. A maid's daughter, someone hissed. A foreigner. He's giving everything to a foreigner. Amara stood frozen at the back of the hall, every eye in the room burning into her. She had come only to pay her respects to a man she'd known her whole life. She had no idea that within the next 30 minutes, her entire world was about to shatter and rebuild itself from the ground up. Why would Korea's most feared and calculating mafia boss leave his entire empire, not to his own blood, but to the daughter of the woman who once cleaned his floors? The answer went back 20 years, and it was about to change everything. If this story has already grabbed you, hit subscribe right now so you don't miss where this goes, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after the video ends. 20 years earlier, Chairman Kang sat behind a mahogany desk the size of a small boat, signing documents that moved millions of dollars, and, quietly, several lives. He was a man built from steel and suspicion. Men who crossed him disappeared. Men who served him well disappeared into wealth. There was no in-between with Chairman Kang, and everyone in his mansion knew it. That same year, Grace Adeyemi arrived at his estate, carrying a single suitcase and a 5-year-old daughter clutching her hand. Grace had left Nigeria after her husband's death, chasing the only promise she had left, a chance to build something better for her child. In Korea, that promise came in the shape of a live-in housekeeping job in the mansion of a man other staff members spoke of, only in hushed, frightened tones. "You'll clean the West Wing," the head housekeeper told her flatly on her first day, barely glancing up. "Don't speak to the chairman unless spoken to. Don't look him in the eye, and keep that child out of sight." Grace nodded, gripping Amara's small hand tighter. "Yes, ma'am." The other staff didn't bother hiding their whispers. "Another foreigner," one maid muttered to another as Grace passed with a mop bucket. "How long do you think she'll last?" "She won't understand our ways," another replied. "None of them ever do." Grace heard every word. She said nothing. She simply worked, scrubbing floors until they gleamed, ironing shirts with the precision of a tailor, and never, not once, touching a single item that wasn't hers, even when money was left carelessly on tables as a test. Word of her honesty eventually reached Chairman Kang himself, though he said nothing about it for months. Amara, meanwhile, waited every afternoon on a small bench near the garden after school, swinging her legs and reading whatever book she'd borrowed from the local library. The other children in the neighborhood sometimes taunted her for her accent, her hair, her skin. She came home some days with tears she tried to hide from her mother. "They said I don't belong here," she whispered one evening, resting her head on Grace's lap. Grace stroked her daughter's hair gently. "You belong wherever your heart is honest, Amara. Never let anyone tell you otherwise. We did not come this far to shrink ourselves for people who refuse to see us." One rainy afternoon, 7-year-old Amara wandered further than she should have, following the sound of a piano no one ever played, until she pushed open the door to Chairman Kang's private office. He sat alone behind his enormous desk, staring at old photographs, his face carved from stone and shadow. He looked up sharply. "Who let you in here?" Most adults trembled under that gaze. Amara simply tilted her head, studying him, the way a child studies something they don't yet understand. "Why does everyone fear you?" she asked. "When you look so sad?" Chairman Kang said nothing for a long moment. No one. Not his sons, not his executives, not his own wife before she passed, had ever spoken to him like that. He should have snapped at her. He should have called security. Instead, something in his chest, long since sealed shut, cracked open just slightly. "Get out," he finally said, but his voice had lost its edge. Amara ran off without another word, leaving Chairman Kang alone with a question he could not stop turning over in his mind. Why is a man so powerful, and so feared, drawn to the innocent honesty of a little girl he could destroy with a single phone call? Over the following years, that single encounter grew into something neither of them expected. Amara began finding small reasons to linger near his office, bringing him tea her mother prepared, leaving a drawing on his desk, asking him questions no one else dared to ask. At first, Chairman Kang tolerated her. Then he began to expect her. Then, without ever admitting it aloud, he began to look forward to it. "Why do you always eat alone?" 10-year-old Amara asked him one evening, setting a tray down herself, instead of letting a servant do it. "Powerful men eat alone," he replied. "It keeps enemies from poisoning conversation." "That sounds lonely." He almost smiled. Almost. "Loneliness is the price of power." "Then maybe power isn't worth the price," she said simply, and walked out before he could respond. Amara told him about Nigeria, the markets, the colors, the songs her grandmother used to sing. She told him about the isolation of growing up black in a country that often didn't know what to do with her, the stares on the subway, the whispered comments in school hallways, the constant, exhausting task of proving she belonged. Chairman Kang listened in a way he never listened to his own sons, who visited him only when they needed money, connections, or forgiveness for another scandal. Junho, his eldest, grew colder and more entitled with each passing year, surrounding himself with men who flattered him and businesses that skirted the edge of legality, even by their family's already loose standards. Min-jae, the younger son, drank his frustrations away and gambled away sums that would have fed entire villages, always assuming his father's wealth would cushion every fall. "You spoil that maid's daughter more than you ever spoiled us," Junho snapped one evening, catching his father laughing, actually laughing, at something Amara had said. "She has never asked me for a single thing," Chairman Kang replied coldly. "Can either of you say the same?" Junho had no answer. He simply turned and walked away, jealousy hardening into something far more dangerous than resentment. The contrast deepened with every year. While his sons chased shortcuts, Amara chased understanding. While they demanded, she asked questions. While they took, she gave. Small things, mostly, but consistent ones. A shared umbrella in the rain, a card on his birthday, handmade, when his sons sent nothing but a curt phone call. Slowly, without either of them naming it, Chairman Kang began to see in Amara, the daughter he might have raised, had life given him a different set of choices. But nothing revealed the true depth of what connected this family to Chairman Kang more than a single, violent night. The night that changed the course of everything. It happened during a business dinner turned ambush. Rival gang members, disguised as waitstaff, moved into position around the private dining hall, where Chairman Kang sat with his closest allies. Grace had come only to deliver a forgotten set of documents, standing quietly near the doorway when she noticed it. A flicker of movement, a hand sliding toward a weapon hidden beneath a serving tray, half a second before anyone else in the room registered the danger. She didn't think. She moved. "Get down!" Grace screamed, throwing herself toward Chairman Kang just as the gunman fired. The bullet that was meant for his skull tore into her shoulder instead, and she collapsed against him as guards finally reacted, subduing the attacker in a blur of shouting and gunfire. Chairman Kang knelt over her, pressing his hand against the wound, his composed mask completely gone for the first time in decades. "Why?" he demanded, his voice raw. "Would you do that?" Grace, pale and trembling but conscious, managed a faint, exhausted smile. "You gave my daughter and me a chance to build a life here," she whispered. "I was only protecting that chance." Later, once she'd recovered in a private hospital wing, Chairman Kang insisted on funding personally. He came to her bedside carrying an envelope thick with cash. Enough money to buy a house, start a business, secure her family for a generation. Grace looked at the envelope, then at him, and gently pushed it back across the blanket. "I didn't save your life for money," she said quietly. "I did it because it was right. Please don't take that away from me by turning it into a transaction." Chairman Kang sat in stunned silence. In 30 years of running an empire built on debts, leverage, and favors owed, he had never once met someone who refused payment for saving his life. He left that hospital room a fundamentally changed man, though he told no one, not even Grace herself, the silent vow he made that night. He would protect her daughter's future, no matter what it cost him. This was the moment the story shifted from something simple into something far deeper. It was no longer just a powerful man who liked a clever little girl. It was a man quietly repaying a debt that money alone could never settle, a debt of loyalty, sacrifice, and grace, in every sense of the word. Years passed. Grace's health, weakened by complications from the old injury and years of hard, uncomplaining work, began to decline. She spent her final months in a small room in the mansion, refusing to move to a hospital, insisting she wanted to die surrounded by the walls she had polished with her own hands for 2 decades. Amara, now a young woman, sat by her mother's bedside every night, holding her hand. "Promise me something," Grace whispered one evening, her voice barely above breath. "Anything, Uma," Amara said, using the Korean word for mother that had become second nature to her. "Never let anyone make you feel like you don't belong somewhere," Grace said. "Not because of your skin, not because of where you were born. You belong wherever you choose to stand tall." Grace passed away quietly that winter, and something in Chairman Kang broke that he never allowed anyone to see. At her modest funeral, he stood at the very back of the room, unnoticed by most, and said nothing to anyone. He simply watched Amara weep over her mother's coffin, and in that moment, his silent vow became an unbreakable mission. If you're feeling this story the way we are, please take a second right now to like this video and leave a comment, even just one word about how this part made you feel. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it, and we read every single comment. In the years following Grace's death, Chairman Kang began quietly orchestrating Amara's future from the shadows. He established an anonymous scholarship fund routed through 3 separate shell foundations, ensuring Amara would never trace it back to him. Her tuition for university was paid in full before she ever applied. When she expressed interest in business, an unnamed corporate sponsor appeared to fund her studies. When she pursued law, a mysterious grant covered her fees entirely. When she wanted to study international leadership abroad, an anonymous benefactor arranged the opportunity before she'd even finished writing her application. Amara had no idea. She simply believed, with quiet gratitude, that the universe, or perhaps her mother's spirit, was rewarding her hard work. "I don't understand it," she told a university mentor once. "Every time I need something, a door just opens. It's like someone out there believes in me more than I believe in myself." Meanwhile, the empire Chairman Kang had built for decades began fraying at its foundations. Junho, now overseeing several key business fronts, made increasingly reckless decisions, skimming funds, making enemies of longtime allies, and secretly negotiating deals behind his father's back with rival organizations who smelled weakness the moment Chairman Kang's health began to falter. Min Jae, drowning in gambling debts, made an even more desperate move, quietly selling sensitive information about the family's operations to a rival syndicate in exchange for enough cash to cover his losses, convincing himself his father would never discover the betrayal. Rival gangs, sensing the empire's cracks, began circling like sharks scenting blood in the water. Meetings grew tense. Alliances shifted overnight. Executives who had served the Kang family for decades began quietly hedging their loyalty, uncertain which son, if either, deserved to inherit what their father had spent a lifetime building. Chairman Kang, now visibly weakened by illness he hid from almost everyone, understood with brutal clarity that time was slipping away faster than he could control. He needed to know, beyond any doubt, who truly deserved what remained of his life's work. So he designed a final test. He summoned his sons and, separately, Amara, now a sharp, principled young lawyer with a growing reputation for integrity in Seoul's business circles, to handle a deliberately manufactured crisis. A shipment of goods had allegedly gone missing. Blame could easily fall on a low-level warehouse employee, an immigrant worker with a family depending on his modest salary, unless someone intervened, took responsibility, and covered the loss quietly. Junho didn't hesitate. "Fire the warehouse worker," he ordered coldly. "Publicly. Make an example so this never happens again. It's not our problem how his family survives." Min Jae, when informed, simply shrugged. "Not my department. Handle it however's cheapest. I've got other things going on." His mind was already elsewhere, already calculating how to hide his own betrayal from discovery. Amara, however, spent 3 sleepless nights personally investigating the situation, discovering the missing shipment had actually been misrouted due to a clerical error nobody had bothered to check. She tracked the goods herself, corrected the paperwork, and specifically requested that the warehouse worker, who had done nothing wrong, receive a formal apology and a small bonus for the stress the situation had caused him. "He has children depending on that job," she told Chairman Kang directly, unaware this entire crisis had been engineered as her final examination. Punishing an innocent man to protect the company's image isn't strength, it's cowardice, wearing a suit. Chairman Kang studied her from across his desk, the same desk she'd once burst into as a fearless 7-year-old, and felt something settle firmly into place inside him. That same week, everything collided at once. Rival gang leader Director Choi, sensing the empire's instability, made his move, arranging a tense, dangerous confrontation meant to force Chairman Kang into surrendering key territories before his death could be used as an excuse for a hostile, bloody takeover. Armed men filled a private meeting room, voices rose, threats sharpened into something far more physical. "Your sons are already selling you out," Director Choi sneered, sliding a folder across the table containing evidence of Min Jae's betrayal. "Face it, old man. Your empire is already collapsing from the inside. Sign the transfer papers now, or things get considerably uglier tonight." Chairman Kang, weakened but unshaken, studied the damning folder in cold silence. Around him, armed men shifted restlessly, waiting for a single wrong word to erupt into violence. It was, without question, the single most dangerous moment the empire had faced in over a decade, and everyone in that room understood that whatever happened next would determine who truly controlled Korea's underworld for the next generation. If your heart is racing right now, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the ending. And smash that like button, because this is exactly the moment where everything comes crashing together. "You think exposing my son's greed frightens me?" Chairman Kang finally said, his voice steady despite the guns aimed casually around the room. "I've known about betrayal since before you were old enough to hold a weapon, Choi. Did you really believe my empire depends on men foolish enough to sell secrets for gambling debts?" Director Choi's confidence flickered, just slightly. "Then who does it depend on, old man? Your empire is dying with you." Chairman Kang allowed himself a thin, dangerous smile. The same smile that had once made grown men empty their bank accounts rather than face his wrath. "It depends," he said quietly, "on someone you'll never see coming." He gave a single, subtle signal, and loyal security forces, men whose allegiance had never wavered, carefully positioned in advance by Chairman Kang himself, anticipating exactly this kind of betrayal, moved in swiftly, disarming Director Choi's men before a single shot could be fired. The coup collapsed within minutes, Director Choi dragged away in humiliated silence, and Chairman Kang's iron grip over his empire remained, for now, unbroken. But the damage to his health and to his trust in his own sons was already done. That night, exhausted and gravely weakened, Chairman Kang summoned his lawyer to his private study and rewrote his will for the final time. Weeks later, Chairman Kang passed away quietly in his sleep, his final wishes sealed in an envelope no one, not even his own sons, had been permitted to see beforehand. Which brought everyone back to that chaotic funeral hall, where Amara Adeyemi stood frozen at the center of a storm she never asked to be part of, surrounded by furious executives, humiliated sons, and a room full of people demanding answers she didn't yet have herself. "This is absurd," Junho shouted, slamming his palm against a table as the lawyer struggled to restore order. "She's not even Korean. She's the daughter of a servant. This must be some kind of manipulation." "Sit down, Junho," the lawyer said firmly, "because your father anticipated exactly this reaction." He recorded a message for this exact moment. A screen lowered at the front of the hall. The room fell into a tense, uneasy silence as Chairman Kang's face appeared, visibly weakened but composed, recorded just weeks before his death. "If you're watching this," his recorded voice began, "then I am gone, and my will has already caused the chaos I fully expected it to cause." Junho's jaw tightened. Min-jae stared at the floor, unable to meet the screen's gaze. "Many of you judged Grace Adeyemi the moment she stepped into my home," Chairman Kang continued. "A foreign widow, a maid, someone beneath your notice. Yet that same woman threw herself in front of a bullet meant for me, and refused every reward I offered her afterward. She asked only for the chance to build an honest life for her daughter." Gasps rippled through the hall. Several executives who had known Grace personally lowered their heads in quiet shame. "Her daughter Amara showed me more loyalty, more honesty, and more courage than my own sons ever did. Not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent acts of integrity when she believed no one important was watching. I quietly funded her education for over a decade, and she never once knew it was me. She built her success through her own discipline, unaware I was simply keeping a promise to her mother." Amara's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely down her face as pieces of her entire life suddenly clicked into painful, beautiful focus. "My sons," Chairman Kang's recorded voice continued, colder now, "chose greed when tested with the fate of an innocent worker. Amara chose compassion, even though the test cost her nothing to fail quietly. Blood may build a family, but it does not automatically earn the right to lead one. Character does." Junho's face had gone completely white. Min-jae wouldn't lift his eyes from the floor. "Therefore," the recording concluded, "I leave my empire, in its entirety, to Amara Adeyemi, not because she is owed it, but because she has already proven, again and again, that she deserves it." The screen went dark. For a long moment, absolute silence gripped the hall. Then, slowly, one of the eldest executives, a man who had worked beside Chairman Kang for over 25 years, rose from his seat and bowed deeply toward Amara. "I judged you unfairly," he said quietly. "I apologize." One by one, hesitantly at first, and then with growing conviction, other executives followed his lead, until most of the hall stood bowing toward the young woman who, 20 years earlier, had simply asked a frightened, powerful man why he looked so sad. Junho stormed out in humiliated silence, unable to accept what he'd just witnessed. Min-jae, exposed and disgraced, quietly disappeared from the family's affairs entirely within the year. Amara, in the months that followed, made a decision that surprised absolutely no one who truly knew her. She dismantled every illegal operation the empire had quietly relied on for decades, transforming the Kang Corporation into a fully legitimate international business, built on the same principles her mother had lived by every single day of her life: honesty, quiet dignity, and unwavering integrity, regardless of who was watching. She established the Grace Adeyemi Foundation, dedicated to supporting immigrant families navigating unfamiliar countries, funding education for underprivileged children, and mentoring young entrepreneurs who, like her, had once been told they didn't belong. At the foundation's opening ceremony, standing before a crowd that included former staff, reformed executives, and dozens of immigrant families whose lives she was already changing, Amara looked out over the room and spoke the words that would define the rest of her life. "My mother once told me to belong wherever I choose to stand tall," she said, her voice steady and clear. "Chairman Kang taught me that true legacy isn't about blood, or money, or fear. It's about the quiet choices we make when no one is watching, and the people we choose to lift up along the way." She paused, glancing briefly toward the empty chair reserved in the front row. A chair left permanently unoccupied in honor of both her mother and the man who had quietly become a father figure to her, in ways neither of them had ever fully spoken aloud. "Blood may build a family," Amara said softly, echoing the very words that had once saved her entire future. "But character determines who is worthy of carrying its legacy." If this story moved you even a little, don't scroll away just yet. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss stories like this one. Leave a comment telling us which moment hit you hardest, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that character will always outlast greed. We'll see you in the next story.